Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday Build. This is episode 1.33, and today we're going to be discussing the topic, how I run a U.S. business while living abroad. Lessons learned from living in London, featuring time zones, Wi-Fi, museums, and choices. So my name is Brittany Hernandez, and I am a lawyer, a professional no-code, low-code developer, a legal tech educator, and the global ambassador to law schools for Gavel, formerly Documate. Now, relevant to this conversation is that I'm actually from San Diego, California, but I have lived in London for almost 3 years. So as I mentioned in today's conversation, I'm going to be discussing how I run my US business, which is an LLC, while living abroad. And also I have a law firm that I run from here as well, and how I'm able to take on clients from here in London, even if my clients are in the US. So my story for how this all works out is really meant to show you how you're able to design your life in a way that suits your personal taste and your personal interest in travel, for example. In my case, I love to travel and I love being able to work and live anywhere I want to, no matter what. So that's a really high priority and high value for me, is the ability to just pick up and go somewhere tomorrow if I want to. So if I'm here in London and I want to travel to Norway, that's really important for me personally that I'm able to do that. So I'm going to be going through in this particular conversation and episode today of how I got to London, how I stayed here, how I work here, and how I stay agile and scale my business from here as well. So maybe from something that I share with you today, you'll be able to do the same if travel and adventure is a high priority for you. So stay tuned. So this conversation and this story actually starts back in 2013. So back in 2013, I had the goal of going into the FBI as a special agent. So I know it's a far cry from what I'm doing now, but for about 10 years, it was my goal to go into the FBI. So one of the ways at the time that you could go into the FBI as a special agent was under different types of tracks. And one of the tracks was to be coming in as a lawyer or an accountant or as an IT specialist. And in my case, I figured if I came in under the law track, then if I decided along the way through law school that I no longer wanted to be an FBI agent and I wanted to just practice law instead, that I had that already as a fallback and that I already was educated as a lawyer, already took the bar and so on. And I didn't have to pursue becoming an FBI agent if I chose after that time that I didn't want to anymore. So it made it to where I still had this fallback career that would be suitable to my personality and interests, no matter what. However, law school can be very expensive. So I had to come up with a way for me to be able to pay for law school, having come from a family that's not super wealthy, that's able to pay for it out of pocket. And I myself wasn't able to pay for it out of pocket. So I found a way to pay for law school through the GI Bill from the United States Coast Guard. So this is going to be relevant, even though we're starting way back in my story, because of the fact that I went into the Coast Guard to get something called the GI Bill. So what the GI Bill does is it allows you to, after you served a particular amount of months or years in the Coast Guard for active duty, that you're able to then have this GI Bill for you for tuition for school. So what that means is they give you 36 months of free tuition at a school of your choice, and they'll cover that tuition up to a certain amount. So in my case, I went into the Coast Guard. I served on active duty for 4 years. I was a boatswain's mate, second class petty officer when I got out. I served in Puerto Rico and in Alaska. I went to my A school in Virginia, and I went to boot camp in Cape May, New Jersey. So I got to do lots of fun things while I was there. I got to go through a boarding officer boot camp or course that was for 5 weeks in Charleston, South Carolina. So I got to do lots of fun, amazing things. And I also got to do search and rescue and aids to navigation work. And so I had this very varied and wonderful career in the Coast Guard for those 4 years. Now, what's key here is that because I was in the Coast Guard, after I had already graduated from my 4-year degree at UCSD, it meant that I had more schooling and tuition than there was actually needed for law school. So after I served, I went straight into law school literally the next day after my service was ending. So by the books, even if you just take out terminal leave as a factor, I technically got out of the Coast Guard I think it was August 24th, 2017. And then I started law school like August 25th, 2017 or something like that. It was like literally the next day. So it worked out to where because I was in the Coast Guard, and I went to California Law School, California Western School of Law in San Diego. It made it to where I actually graduated a little bit early. So I took the bar exam in February 2020. So I was at Cal Western for, because I was also taking classes during the summer, which also influenced my ability to graduate early in this particular case, is partly due to the fact that I was on the GI Bill as well, because what it does is it gives you a stipend while you're in school. So basically what happens is you get tuition money that's paid to the school, but you also get a stipend for your living expenses, like your rent, your food, and things like that while you're in school, but you have to be in school full time to get the stipend. So what I ended up doing was I was full time the entire time through the summers as well while I was at Cal Western. So what that meant is I was able to graduate an entire term early. And because of that, I was able to save up some of that time as well. Thankfully, I did that because I ended up graduating in January 2020 and taking the February 2020 bar exam literally a month or so before COVID hit and wiped us all out. So I actually had my law school graduation on Zoom. So I only got to wear my robes one time in my small apartment for like 2 minutes. I took one small video and maybe like 2 pictures that I won't post anywhere because it's just me like taking a picture in my bathroom. So it's definitely an experience where I would love to go back and take my pictures and do the whole thing and everything. But the long story short is that because I was able to take the bar and pass it before COVID happened, I was a licensed attorney by May of 2020. Now, this is relevant as well because what I knew at the time, because I had done the calculation to see how much money of the GI Bill I would have left over before I graduated from law school, figuring out all of my credits and everything, I realized that I hadn't used up all of my GI Bill, and I was the only one who was going to be able to use the GI Bill because I didn't serve for a period of time that would allow me to transfer it to anyone else. So what that meant was that if I was going to use it, and I thought in my head, if I'm going to use it ever, I should probably use it now while I'm not married and I don't have any kids and I'm already in the habit of studying from being in law school and from taking the bar exam. So what I actually did was I was able to apply for and be accepted into the master's degree in international film business from the University of Exeter, and it's a joint program between the University of Exeter and the London Film School. So this is a 1-year program, so it's 1 year full time, and it worked out perfectly because after all of the calculations, I had 11 months and 20 days left of free education. So just under a year of free education left, and that fit perfectly for this particular master's degree here in London. So when I was doing a lot of research around different programs and how I could use up the rest of this tuition, I wasn't actually thinking that much about studying abroad. I was looking more at the programs, and I even looked at things at like USC or UCLA, things like a master's degree in production and things like that. But it didn't really work because a lot of those master's programs in the US were 2 years or 4 years or whatever else. And I just needed to use up this 1 year, and I only had that 1 year that I could use. So it actually just kind of turned out that I had found this particular program, which was really worthwhile for my particular expertise and focus, because I focused on intellectual property law and entertainment law. And I was particularly interested in learning about international copyright law as it pertains to entertainment law and films in particular. So this made it to where, because of the stars aligning, and even though it was during the height of COVID in October 2020, I still had the opportunity to get my Tier 4 visa approved, which I'll go into in a moment, to come here to the UK, live here and study in the UK, doing this master's degree. That was the perfect amount of time that was left over from my tuition from the GI Bill. So like I said, even though it didn't make sense when I first started that I was starting this conversation with a conversation around my time in the military back in 2013 to 2017, but you'll see from this that every step to getting to where I am now, living abroad in London, came from my time in the military and the fact that I used the GI Bill to get here for a master's degree after I finished law school and passed the bar exam. So with that being said, this was how I was able to get here, was through this process of going into the military, going through law school, using the GI Bill for law school, and then using the remainder to come here for a master's degree for a 1-year full-time study. And because I came here on a 1-year full-time study, I was able to come into the country for an extended period of time past the tourist visa on a student visa. So this was called at the time a Tier 4 student visa. And so this makes it to where you're able to study in the UK if you're 16 or over, and you've been offered a place on a course by a licensed student sponsor, have enough money to support yourself and pay for your course. The amount will vary depending on your circumstances. Can speak, read, write, or understand English, and have consent for your parents if you're 16 or 17, and you'll need evidence when you apply. Yeah, so this visa has replaced the Tier 4 general student visa. So now it's called just a student visa. So this is a very helpful way of coming into the UK is under a student visa if you're able to meet these different requirements. And one of the things that I would like to shout out is that one of the people who has inspired me in this particular realm of being able to travel while being an attorney is actually Kayla Hernandez. So shout out to Kayla, who's a lawyer who I used to work with when I was at USIP Attorneys. So Kayla is a brilliant attorney who I look up to quite a lot, and we're actually just friends as well. So I worked for USIP Attorneys while I was in law school, and I also worked with them as a post-bar, focusing on things like copyright and trademark matters, as well as write-up publicity, and got to do a lot of cool things with them. And what she taught me was that you're able to do really fun, cool things as an attorney in other places if you put things in the right order. So what I mean by that is that when I worked for her, she told me about a time that she spent like 3 months in Italy doing a painting course or something. And she spent another, couple of months in somewhere else. And that idea, and she would be the kind of person who would do art in the office. So when she would take a break from working, she would be painting a picture using oil paints, and she would have her easel and her canvas and her paints up and ready in the office. And I just thought that was so cool to see that in a mentor and in a boss, that she took the time to explore her life and to express herself creatively and to try different things. And it also reflected in her brilliance as an attorney, that she thought creatively, that she spent time on self-care, and that she was able to translate that to me as somebody who was watching her as an example of what an attorney's life could be like. And so to everyone out there, I would say definitely send a message to Kayla, let her know that what she's doing is awesome, and then send her a little bit of love. Anyway, so basically I was here on the student visa for the entire duration of my program for the master's degree. And then it also gives you a couple of months after your degree is completed so that you can spend some time to look for a job and decide what you're going to be doing next. So one of the things that happened while I was on this student visa and in my master's degree was I was trying to decide that next step. Is like, what am I going to do? Am I going to stay here? Am I going to try to go back and build out my practice? And before I actually left for my master's degree, I was introduced to the concept of legal technology through a something called Passport to Practice, which at the time was a way to understand from these different mentors and people in the industry how to utilize legal technology in your practice as a lawyer. So this was really actually so I was part of this summer 2020 curriculum, and we went through all of these different pieces from June to July. And this was also in tandem with another program by Bucerius Law School's Legal Tech Essentials class. So in 2020, actually, let me go back to here. In 2020, they started this. So I got to be a part of the first run of this as well. And like I said, this was kind of ran in tandem with the Passport to Practice schedule. And during this, I learned about legal science and artificial intelligence, digital justice, legal operations, innovators and foundations, and a new perspective on the law. And actually, I've done stuff for ELTA now since then, which is really cool. Actually, I didn't know that they were a sponsor there. But I also got to learn about things like the future of legal services, artificial intelligence and legal analytics, computational law and rules-driven automation, value delivery, value propositions, a monopoly for lawyers, legal technology in Silicon Valley, law firm management teamwork, from lawyer to legal technologist, and all of these different topics. So I got really influenced by this course that I took while I was doing something called the Access to Law Initiative, which is part of California Western School of Law. And it's a way of sole practitioners to kind of get a sense of different ways of having your own practice, basically. So that's just to say, and it's relevant here because while I was doing my master's degree and when I did my dissertation, I did my dissertation on how we can harness technology in order to increase access to lawyers for people who can't afford them, like in my case in my international film business course, film students and early career filmmakers who don't generally have a budget for legal advice in their film budget. So maybe they have zero money to make their student film, but they still have different rights that are going on within this particular film that we would want to have them understand fully what the rights are and have them protected. So I came up with the design and business model for an application that would be used by film students that would have access to lawyers through a point system that would also involve the different businesses who would put on different market research surveys for the students to take. Then the students would be able to take those surveys, earn points, and then use those points towards time with a lawyer. So that's how you can kind of create this ecosystem of value exchange based on what different people need at different times, and also still pay lawyers at a competitive rate while giving access to lawyers to students who are paying through points earned through market research, for example. So that's one way that I was able to demonstrate how we can use legal technology to increase access to lawyers. So I got really interested in legal technology. And this is relevant in the conversation around how I'm able to live in London and operate my business here, in that it made me understand that I had a choice at that time that I could make that would allow me to stay here and work from here if I pursued more of the legal technology route versus the traditional lawyering route. And the reason for that being that although I still have my practice and I was taking on clients that I was able to maintain while I was living here and they lived there, is that if I were to try to go into litigation, for example, and I would need to appear in court or to do lots of things that were in person and that needed some different things than like more of a transactional attorney, then this wouldn't necessarily be something that I could have as a lifestyle choice to study abroad or to be able to take courses and be a lawyer at the same time, and to fly to Norway if I wanted to, and to go to Germany in a couple of days if I just chose to, and to have that kind of lifestyle that I wanted. So one of the main takeaways that I would say is that when you are deciding that you want to be someone who's able to travel and have adventures in your life while you're still working as an attorney or whatever, is to understand like what types of areas of law and types of law or types of tech, for example, would allow you to do that type of thing. So in my case, I chose not to pursue any type of litigation, to focus more on transactional matters and things like copyright registrations, trademark registrations, contract reviews, business matters where it would be like something like setting up LLCs or whatever else, or business formation types of activities as a lawyer. That makes it to where I don't physically need to be present somewhere in order to fulfill my duties. So that's one choice that you would need to make, is to understand that you can gain one thing, but you'd have to maybe give up something else. But you have to choose what your priority is and what's more important to you. For me, the highest value that I have is the freedom to travel and the freedom to pursue a life that gives me joy and happiness. So it's something that you would need to find out for yourself if it gives you more joy and fulfills you more as a person to be able to be someone who's physically present in a particular area to perform certain duties. If that brings you more joy than traveling abroad, for example, then that's the way that you should pursue, rather than for someone like me who wants the freedom to be in a cafe or in a museum to work, or in London, and then tomorrow I decide that I'm going to move to somewhere else or to visit, another country. Then that's the lifestyle that you're going to need to choose as far as what type of work you take on. So before I move a little bit deeper into that conversation of how I work while I'm here, I want to talk a little bit about how I was able to stay here after my master's degree was finished. So like I said, on the student visa, that allows you to be here for a particular length of time for your study time, plus a few months afterwards to allow you some time to find a job, to get a sponsor, or to decide what you're going to do. In my particular case, I met my partner, who is now my fiance. And so he's lived here for 11 plus years, and he's a Met police officer here. So for us, we decided that we would stay here for longer because he had just gotten into a new position at his job. And I had the ability to apply for something called the graduate visa. So I'll go into that in a second as well. But that was a life choice that we made together that would make it to where we're able to stay here for a certain length of time. And then the plan would be that either in the future we would have me and him have our spousal visas for each other, or that we would stay here, or that we would go to America. So it just depends. And in my particular case, I also love it here. So it wasn't just that I wanted to be with him, but also I really, really like living in London because it allows you not only to experience such a beautiful and historic place, but also allows me to travel to anywhere for really cheap. So I just did a round trip to Norway for 5 days, and it was like less than $100 to get there and come back. So that's pretty attractive from a lifestyle perspective, to be able to travel for less than $100 to places I would never get to, or would be something I have to save up for a long time if I was traveling from different parts of America. And so for me, being here is just like like this highway to the rest of the world. So that's something to consider as well. So that's just to say that we had decided as a couple that we would stay here for a little bit longer, and then decide at this next juncture whether we would move back to California or to stay here in London a little bit longer. So right now, after I finished my student visa, after I finished and graduated from my master's degree, with distinction, by the way. So it was a really great program, and it was really fun to go through, and I made lots of lifelong friends, and I did well in the course. I was able to make that decision to stay a little bit longer, and I paid for a graduate visa. So one thing to note about student visas and graduate visas, if you decide to come under these particular routes, is that they can be a little bit expensive, but expensive is kind of a relative term. So You need to be able to demonstrate that you have enough money to pay for your course for one academic year. You need to be able to show that you have enough money to support yourself. And then you also need to be able to actually pay for the visa. So the visa costs money. So I think the visa was, let me see. Let me just see. I know that the graduate visa was like 1,900 pounds if you take the two things together. Okay, so it's a $715 application fee. So let me just do a little bit of quick math for you here visually. So 715 pounds is the application fee, plus you need to pay a surcharge, which is usually $624 per year. So this is not representative because this is actually good for 2 years. So you need to add an additional 624 pounds. So yeah, it was 1,963 pounds. And if you do pounds to dollars, for those of you that are in the US watching, that's 1,963 pounds is $2,499.09. So it's quite expensive. Like I said, everything is relative. For some people, this will be very cheap. For some people, this is astronomically expensive, but it's just good to know going in how much it might cost and how much you would have to save for if you were going to get this particular visa after your studies. So for this particular one, this allows someone to stay in the UK for at least 2 years after successfully completing a course in the UK. So I successfully completed the master's degree while I was on the student visa, and then I was applying for the graduate visa in order to stay for another 2 years. So you can apply for this one if you're physically in the UK. Your current visa is a student visa or Tier 4 general student visa. You studied a UK bachelor's degree, postgrad degree, or other eligible course for a minimum period of time with your student visa or Tier 4 general student visa. Your education provider, such as your university or college, has told the Home Office you've successfully completed your course. So all of these particular things were met in my particular case. How long you can stay. So it says here that a graduate visa lasts for 2 years. If you have a PhD or other doctoral qualification, it will last for 3 years. So your visa will start from the day your application is approved. And if you want to stay longer, you can't extend this particular graduate visa. However, you may be able to switch to a different visa, for example, a skilled worker visa. So there's lots of different types. So after this particular one, you can do skilled worker visa, which has a different set of criteria or eligibility. And then you have other types of different types of UK visas that you can get as well, such as a spousal visa, or there's also one around like innovation. So at this particular time, since we're planning on getting married, one thing I can do is apply for a spouse visa. The other thing I could do is figure out how to get a skilled worker visa if I was trying to stay here for a bit longer as well. So as far as what will come next for me is a different matter than how I actually work here. So let's get to that part next. So I told you how I got here. So I got here through this long journey of going into the military, getting the GI Bill, going to law school, deciding that I had, realizing that I still had about a year left over of tuition that I could use for free to get a master's degree, which led me to this particular program, which fit all of the specifications that I was looking for, which was that it was a year or less, and that it was a master's, and that it was in something related to the film business or entertainment industry. How I was able to stay here. So that was with the student visa at first. And then after the student visa ran out from finishing my course, and then it had like a couple months left, I was able to pay for and apply for and get accepted for the graduate visa. And so I've been here on that graduate visa for this period, this length of time, and then it ends in April of next year. And then how I actually work here is more a matter of logistics of how do you run a business while you're living abroad. So under these this particular section, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of choices a little bit more. So as I mentioned, this is really about how you prioritize different needs and values in your life. So if you're somebody who, as I mentioned, values freedom to travel and the freedom to kind of move around as you'd like, then that's going to limit some of your choices from a career perspective. So in my case, I have my own business, which is a California LLC, or limited liability company. And I'm able to continue to have an address there, and still work and live over here because my work style is completely 100% remote. And all I need in order to work from anywhere is a laptop and a Wi-Fi connection. So if I'm able to have those two things, then I'm good to go. So you'd have to decide for yourself whether the ability to move around is more important than your ability to do some other type of work. Also, in my particular case, like I mentioned, I focused on more transactional law rather than more litigation from when I was practicing more traditional type of law. But now what I've done is transition more into legal tech and legal tech education to focus my attention more on helping people transition into the future of the law, as someone who has done traditional law, and focusing on how we can then turn that into legal products that people can use and access online. So as I mentioned, with this idea of being able to go anywhere with a laptop and some Wi-Fi is something that I think I'm really happy about. And I'm happy that that's how I've structured my life and my career so that I'm able to just work from anywhere. One thing that I'll note, which is in my favor, I like this particular case, but it's something to consider when you're deciding whether you want to not necessarily come to the UK, but to live here or anywhere else that's not from your like home country, is to understand how time zones play into your ability to like live, work, and study in different places. So when I was doing the master's degree, some people, because it was during COVID and we didn't actually we only got to go to class physically in person 4 times in the entire year. So, and they were all in Exeter. So I never actually went into the London Film School building until after I graduated, and it was to pick up my ID card. So I lived in Exeter for 2.5 months and was able to physically go to class 4 times. Within like 2.5 months. But what I mean to say is that during that time, not everybody came here from their home country. So some people stayed in places like France, in India, in the US, and so on. And what it kind of showed us too was how hard it can be to have an international class when some people are waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to attend class, and other people are, staying up late to attend class because of the different time zones. So time zones is actually a huge consideration when you're considering who are your clients, where do they live versus where you live. So one of the things that I would always do whenever I would have new clients come on board, or before they even came on board with me, was I would give them a notice to let them know that sometimes my communications will be delayed by a couple of hours because they might email me at, let's say, 3 p.m. in California, but for me, 8 hours ahead of them, that's 11 p.m. So I'm sleeping. So I'm not going to actually see their message until the morning. So I don't want them to worry. I want to preempt them to let them know that I live in London. I'm just very transparent and clear to clients that I live abroad. And so if you'd like me to take on this case, there may be gaps in the communication by a few hours, but I'll always get back to you within 24 hours, or whatever the case may be. But setting those expectations and managing those expectations of clients, if you're working one-on-one with clients who expect quick communication, just to let them know, I will be here for you, that I have your best interest in mind, and I'll be there for you, etc. But just know that because of the physical time difference of California being 8 hours behind where I live, that there are going to be times where I'm going to have to message you when I wake up in the morning. So I think time zones are a big one, especially if you're and especially when they're working against you. In my case, I love living 8 hours ahead of California and 5 hours ahead of the East Coast because it allows me to get a lot of work done in the morning, which is my best energy time, while everyone else is still asleep. So once I've done my work that I wanted to do for the day and nobody has bothered me yet because they're all sleeping, once they all start to wake up, I'm ready to address their issues. So, or I have what they need already ready because I had the time to work on it during the day while they were sleeping. So in my particular case, I like living ahead of where my clients live because I get that extra lead time in order to get anything done that I want to without anyone emailing me or messaging me on Slack or whatever else during that time that I work the best. And then I can get to actually, messaging them or calling them live towards the afternoon. So logistically, that's how I'm able to work here is that I'm able to kind of consider my availability. I'm able to consider the different choices of what I've decided to do for work and what types of work that I do. And that the hardware that I would need is not necessarily an office space, but just that I'm able to have a laptop, maybe a nice camera, a good connection, and I'm good to go. Finally, I wanted to mention under this category of how I work here is that if you're going to live abroad, you should be where you are and enjoy it too. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense to live, let's say, in London and spend your whole time working in your house, because then what's the point? So what I like to do is on days where I don't have to do any recording is to actually go and work in museums or at parks. So in London, I'm blessed to be able to walk into the Victoria and Albert Museum for free anytime during the day from, I think it's like maybe they open, let's say at like 10 and they close at maybe 6. And other places, depending on where you go, different libraries are huge and amazing. And some of them are open till like 8 p.m. So there's lots of different places where you can really immerse yourself in the cultural environment. And then what I like to do when I take those breaks to go, not to take a break, but to take the day to go work at a museum, for example, is it makes it to where when I take a break, let's say for lunch or whatever else, I can just go down to the cafeteria, go out into the garden area, and then just like walk through the statues and all of the different cultural artifacts. So just take a mental note that if you're going to do what it takes to get abroad, make sure you don't spend your whole time working in your office. Take the time to actually be where you are and go out and explore. I love to take my laptop, take a blanket, and go to Hyde Park and work from there from my hotspot. There's also lovely little gardens in London as well that allow you to just go in and lay down and do your work. So I'd highly recommend that if you're going to do that, especially even if you're working from where you are going to stay for a long time, enrich your experience of that place by actually immersing yourself in some of the different cultural artifacts and different things that it has to offer you. Okay, so finally, I'm going to go into how do I stay agile and scale while I travel, and this has to do with tech. So I have really become involved in the no-code space. So one of the things that I like to do is to stay really lean and agile and to scale through tech. And part of that is by being more of a solopreneur, but I do have one employee who is part-time as an assistant. So I manage my business in a way that makes it to where I'm able to accept and reject clients as I please. And I also am able to pass on any work that I don't want to do either to automations or to my assistant. So I just give her, some hours every week to just look into something that would be maybe a dead end that I didn't want to spend time on. And I got that idea through a book called We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers. She talks about delegation. So this one here, we should all be millionaires, change your thinking, build, bank, and claim your independence, Women's Guide to Earning More Wealth, more building wealth, and gaining economic power. So this is a fabulous book. But anyway, she just talks about how one of the things you can do to kind of invest a little bit of money to take back some of those hours. So let's say you pay someone even just for 5 hours a week to look into something for you, you get to gain those hours back. And it's been super helpful. So that's one of the things that I do is I have an assistant who's based out of California. I meet with her once a week. I give her about, 5 to 10 hours of work per week, sometimes less, which she already has a full-time job with the different work. So it's just, I'm not her main source of income. It's just a way of her getting some extra income and for me to be able to have a little bit of help, but I don't need a full-time employee. So that's one of the things that I do as well. And then the rest of the things that I need to do will get delegated to automations and tech, and specifically in no code tech, because it allows me to not have to, also become an expert in coding in order to have a website and to have a domain name and to have, a CRM and to have a way of, turning my expertise into courses. So some of the tech I like to use a lot is things like Softer, Canva, Airtable, Gavel, Clio, HubSpot, Calendly for booking, so I don't have to have my assistant do any booking for me, things like that. So you want to think about how you can utilize, let's say Zapier, for example, as well, Slack, or any type of ways of harnessing these tools and turning these tools into your employees or your little minions to go out there and take over some of this work for you so that you can focus on the things that you love and spend more time actually exploring and traveling and being where you are as you get to travel. So that is all for my speech for today. We've gone over a lot, which was kind of how I was able to get here, how I was able to stay here, how I was able to work here, and how I'm able to stay agile and scale while I'm traveling. So I hope this was useful. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you my information in a moment. But I'm always happy to chat with people and connect. I love hearing people's stories. So just a few announcements before we wrap up. This has been an episode of the Wednesday Build, which has new episodes live every Wednesday. I come out with a new issue of Code Word Hex, which is a digital interactive magazine, every Tuesday, along with the Tuesday Forecast, which is a free weekly newsletter. My academy, Cormiam Academy, has certification courses in Gavel, formerly Documate. This is at the basic, silver, and gold level, as well as a gold test out option if you already are familiar with the platform. I've just revamped the basics and silver course, and I'm going to be revamping our gold course as well to turn it more into a robust legal productization seminar as well. So if you're interested in learning the basics of Gavel and getting certified, as well as learning the silver level or more intermediate level where you're learning more about integrations and customizations, then I recommend Silver course. I also have courses in Softer and Airtable, a certification course in Go Full Page, and more to come. We have a community that is growing, which is called Cormiam Global. So you're welcome to join that by joining any of our courses that are listed here. And also you're able to join the Gavel community by going into the Slack group. So I highly recommend that you go there. There's almost 900 people in that group, which is really exciting and it's growing every day. So thank you so much for those of you that are with me live and those of you that are on the recording. Hello. And we're going to be meeting next Wednesday, the 23rd of August at 10 a.m. Pacific time, if you'd like to join us. I'm going to be discussing increased build speed through motor expectation. And this relates to when I say building with Gavel, for example. And this is a visual and kinesthetic approach to learning no-code development. So we're going to be specifically talking about how we can utilize this idea of training ourselves through visual and kinesthetic expectations to build how fast we can build something with these no-code tools, for example. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or via email at brittany@cormiam.pro. If you have any inquiries relating to Gavel's law school program, since I'm the global ambassador to law schools, you can email me at brittany@gavel.io. So that is all for today. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.